but the influence that you want to have has to be changing in order to be at the same level or a higher level, so it forces you to continue to change also, right? If we stay the same, our business stays the same.
Welcome back to another episode of Entrepreneur Unleashed. My name is Edward Collins. I'm your host. I'm joined in the studio today by Daniel Tribby. We're going to be jumping into topics that you're not going to want to miss, so you definitely want to be paying attention. As you know, if you've been following us for any given amount of time, you know that my honest belief is that the shortcut in your journey of success is by taking advantage of learning vicariously through others. Daniel's going to be talking with us about his trials and triumphs in business, and hopefully you can gain at least one nugget of wisdom out of that experience. So stay tuned for this entire episode. You're not going to want to miss it. We're going to jump right in because I can't wait to get started. Daniel, thank you so much for jumping into the studio today. I know you had a little bit of a journey, flew in to get here last night so that you can be here today. I'm so happy to hear
that's great. That's great. I'm happy to be here as well. Thanks for the invite. The studio is beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Now, as you've watched some of these episodes before, so you know a little bit of my shtick, if you will, of how I go down these paths. But I really do believe that as business owners, we don't have enough resources of honesty and genuine experience. We live in an Instagram world. So right now, all you see is like the perfectly curated pictures, the perfectly curated posts that go online. Even this episode will probably get a little bit of editing. But that's the reality is life isn't picture perfect. Life isn't always roses, and businesses don't always go down the path of, wow, A plus B equals C. Sometimes it's A, where did B go? Mm-hmm. And I'd really like to learn a little bit more about you. So what I'd like to do first, though, is get to know who the young Daniel was. So if you wouldn't mind just taking us back in time, like where are you from? Like, how did you get your start in life?
Sure. Yeah. Absolute hoodlum. I terrorized all neighborhood. No, I actually kind of a fun story, and it probably paves a lot of the future for me, just for you to understand how this got put together. But I was raised by a single mom, and she was a government employee. Right, retired now after 30 years in the whole situation, right? So that allowed me the opportunity that I see now. I hated it back then, but I lived overseas. I grew up in Europe. Oh. So I spent about 6 years in Germany and 2 years in Spain, right? Wow. Which all before I was 15 years old. So half of the first 15 years of my life was spent in other countries, right? Mm-hmm. Learning other people, different cultures. Of course, there are international American schools, right? So I didn't have to learn other languages per se. But when you grow up like that and you're moving every 2-3 years on end, it's you learn to adapt quickly, right? You learn to make new friends. It didn't matter, at that time, of course, there's no Instagram or social, but it didn't really matter what filters you used at that point. You just want to know if people were great or not great. Were you cool, not cool? Can we be friends? No?
Can we be friends?
Right, that was it. And that's kind of the way that I grew up, just basically recreating every 2 or 3 years, right? Wow. Restructuring. And then you take that 15-year-old at this point who's grown up around different cultures, different Americans from different states and backgrounds, and then my mom's like, what we're going to do? Let's move to Georgia. Right? So
Germany, Spain, Georgia.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
And I'm originally
nothing wrong with Georgia, though.
Nothing at all. I'm from Northern Virginia, right? So I grew up Southern. I grew up in that very traditional gentleman, hold the doors, go to church on Sundays. That whole thing. That's how I was raised by my grandfather. But it was very different to go to a smaller town outside of Atlanta where, somebody's great-grandparents, grandparents, and parents all grew up on the same road. We went to the high school with the same people that we're still friends with. We've been, going from elementary school all the way through high school with the same friggin' people. I'm like, I don't know what to do here. Like, I don't know how to fit in.
Oh, wow.
Right. And so it probably took me until college to figure that out, but being an athlete and playing sports and all that doesn't take long to meet new people. Mm-hmm. But it was refreshing to get into the college atmosphere and be able to then recreate with different groups of people again. Right. So that's a life skill that I love to to tell people about because it's carried with me. The ability to not meet strangers, to create conversation, to create new relationships whenever you need to. Right?
So that social interaction skill set is so important,
So
especially in business, but
Right.
just in life in general. Your ability to connect with others, to have conversations and just walk up and say hello and build rapport relatively quickly,
Right.
all of those skills are important. You mentioned something that I definitely want to touch on because it seems to be a theme with a lot of the business owners that I've been talking with lately, and it's the role of sports and the playing of sports and how that impacted the business owner's growth in business. I'm curious, like, what's your take on that?
I think a lot of it has to do with the teamwork aspect, right?
Okay.
I can't stand it when you hear phrases like "it's lonely at the top," and I'm like, you didn't make it to the top by yourself, dummy. Like it just sounds good to you, but nobody gets there by themselves, right? Nobody does. Or this idea of entrepreneurship is a lonely road, right? It's a hard road, but it's not necessarily lonely unless you choose for it to be lonely, right? And so I think a lot of us as athletes have learned to rely on teammates or other people that might have a skill set you need to learn or can support you or inspire you to work harder or to look at things differently. And I think that's a big thing too. And even to this day, I play beach volleyball. I play twos beach volleyball, a little different than having 5 people on a basketball team or 9 on the baseball field. But it's definitely a situation I think that sparks teamwork and creativity and the ability to rely on other people that you trust. And I think that's why that carries over so well from sport into the entrepreneurial aspects of life.
Now, this is like a little bit of us with 2020 hindsight. You can look back and say, that was something that contributed to the milestones that I've been able to achieve. But in the moment, when you were youth, if you will, and going and participating in sports, did you see it that way, or was it I'm just having fun?
Of course not. I mean, you saw it as a team, and you do your damn job, I'll do my damn job, and hopefully at the end of this thing we're going to win, right?
Exactly.
You didn't see it as when you're in the midst of it. You don't always see it, externally, right? Which is why it's important to have mentors and to have coaches and those types of people who can kind of help you see things that you can't see at the time, right? Because you don't always see the way your teammate sees it. But your coach is very happy to let you know how it needs to be seen, right? So,
exactly.
So it does. I think that is another portion that carries over, right? The coaching into the entrepreneurial mindset as well.
And I love that because I think that what you just said is so critical too, because it's not just about within sports, it's within everything in life. It's hard to know where you are in the moment when you're in it. It's easy to look back and say, oh yeah, this is where I was in the journey. But when you're in the moment, it's good to have sounding boards that you can go to, whether they're teammates, whether they're individuals, if you're building a business, whether it's members of your squad, if you will, friends, mentors. How do you feel about the concept of choosing who you surround yourself with?
Yeah. Who was it that said you're the combination of the 5 people you spend the most time with?
Exactly. Yeah.
Right?
The average.
Right. Or the average of. Yeah. So it's very true. Right. I think people don't realize, or maybe we have this idea that the people that we become friends with in high school and college are going to carry with us forever. And that does happen. I have a couple friends that from high school that I'm still, great buddies with. But I think that if you really want to grow as a business owner, you have to grow as a person. And if you're not growing as a person, then your business will stagnate. It will, period. So in order for you to grow as a person, you have to be around other people who have been or are going where you want to go.
Right.
And so it becomes a situation where circles do change, right? It's not that you find friends and then you abandon them, but the influence that you want to have has to be changing in order to be at the same level or a higher level, so it forces you to continue to change also, right? If we stay the same, our business stays the same, right? And if we stay the same, our relationships stay the same. So if you want to truly step into the next version of yourself or have your business step into the next best version of itself, you're going to have to find relationships that drive you to do so or to change.
When you look at that journey for you then, you went to university. What was the university experience like for you?
Well, other than the beer and all the other things, no. It's At first, I had no idea what I wanted to do. Zero clue. None. I got into just, hey, you got to take the core classes, right? Let's take all the same shit that we've been taking for the last 18 years. Let's do that again. I had no idea what I wanted to do. None. I was really good in the sciences, and the biologies and that kind of stuff, like the anatomical sciences. And so I was like, well, let's just start there, and then maybe I'll figure it out as I go. Excuse me. So I was not the greatest student as a freshman and sophomore because there was nothing that interests me. It was the repeat of the same thing. And then as a freshman, I think it was January of my freshman year, I went on a ski snowboarding trip and had somebody cut me off, and I took a tumble backwards and dislocated my shoulder.
Ouch.
Hot mess. And a lot of pain, a lot of problems, and had to go through some rehab. And in the midst of going through that rehab, I was like, this is kind of a cool thing, right? I could do this. And I met another fellow student who was in the sports medicine athletic training program, you know, and for those of you who don't know what those people are, they're the ones that run out on the football field with the fanny packs on and take care of the people that got hurt. That's what an athletic trainer or a sports medicine person does. And so I was like, this will be a lot of fun. I'm an athlete. I'm a sporty guy. I could be around people, and then it fits my science need and everything else. So I was like, let's do this. And once I got into that, because it's something I'm interested in, right, it's easy to dive into it. And so I graduated with a degree in kinesiology and a certification as a sports medicine therapist or certified athletic trainer. And that was it. And I thought to myself, you know what? I'm gonna take on the world as a different version of a physical therapist, if you will. And I'm gonna work with athletes, and I'm gonna do something really amazing. And I'm gonna know all these professional sports guys. And yeah, that's the mindset of a 21, 22-year-old. Right?
Exactly.
So yeah,
your grand vision of what you were going to be able to create.
Right.
Okay. So, but the experience of university itself was fulfilling for you. You had a great time in that environment. You did reasonably well once you got interested in the subject matter.
Absolutely.
What about the experience of relationships in school, like friendships that you kept with you? How did you drive yourself to continue to move forward?
Yeah, it's kind of funny. So one of my really good friends who I met, this is year 2000. I met him 2001, probably right around the same time I hurt my shoulder. And he was the best man in my wedding. I was the best man in his. And 22 years later, we're still friends. And so he actually texted me this morning. He's like, "Oh, down in Miami, having fun at the beach, are you?" I was like, "I'm here working, jackass. Leave me alone." So, but there's quality relationships that I formed in college that I didn't realize were based upon value systems. Right, because I didn't know what a value system was until I got older, right? And now as a 40-year-old, I understand very clearly that you want to keep people in your relationship circle that share similar values, not necessarily similar work environments, but similar value systems, because they're the ones that are going to hold you accountable, right? We call them I think it was Socrates or Aristotle called them friends of the good.
Friends of the good,
right? And those are the people you want to surround yourself with, because they're not going to make judgmental calls based upon your actions. Right?
Exactly.
They're going to hold you accountable and just say, "Hey, this is not the person you said you desired to be at this point. Exactly. So what do we need to do to get you back on track?" And I gravitated towards people like that at a young age, and not knowing really why. Right? The value system was there, and then people who didn't share the value system over time just fizzled away, just naturally. It wasn't like I don't like you anymore because we don't share value systems, right? It was just it just naturally fizzled out. So. His name is Kevin. He and I have remained really good friends for 20 plus years based upon value systems, right? So I think that was probably an early, again, in the moment, not understanding what that is, but looking back on it going, this is why that connection stayed for that long. Right? So as a 22-year-old, you didn't care about that, right? You're like, "Oh, you're cool. Let's go hang out. Let's have beers. Let's go whatever." It was a very different idea of what friendship was as a 20-something.
But again, the vision, because your value system will dictate what you see in life and how you see life. And when you share that commonality, that vision, even if you're doing totally different things, you're driving each other in the same direction.
Right.
Which is, I don't know about a lot of people. I'm not one who would want to go on a long journey on a car ride by myself. I'd want to be with a partner, be with someone who I could talk with in that journey. So finding the right group of friends, the right group of individuals that can be your accountability partners is critical. And you found it at a pretty young age.
Yeah, I wouldn't know. I don't know if it was a group, but there was definitely one person that became part of the group.
Okay.
Right. And he's not a business owner, doesn't really have that aspiration to be. He's a very successful golf course superintendent, but the value systems and the alignment is there. Right. And so, and like you made a great point, as the value system dictates the vision, right? Because the value system is the filter of which we move everything through, right? So if something comes across my plate, does this fit my values? Does this fit my mission? Does this align with who it is that I want to be or the thing that I want to change in the world?
Right.
And if it doesn't, we say no to it, right? The most successful business people are the people who have gotten really good at saying no.
Exactly. Yeah, those two words, yes, no. No is more important.
It definitely is.
Yeah, there's only 24 hours a day, 7 days in a week. And every yes you say to something, you're saying no to something else.
Right, the opportunity cost situation.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
When you look at just getting out of university then, so what was your first venture? Like, what did you jump into? Because now you've gone through the experience of university. You've found a passion that you enjoyed. How did you put that into practice?
Yeah, so the nostalgia is hitting me at the moment. But I was engaged out of college, right? And I was like, I just got to go get the job. I got to do the American dream, right? Go get your job, get a house, have kids, cats, dogs, white picket fence, right? Do all the things, pay your taxes, right? Be an upstanding American. And so I started that whole journey, and I started working for the largest orthopedic group in the Southeast. They're based out of the greater Atlanta area, and I worked there as a rehab provider. Okay. So I had a little taste of what it was like to be part of a professional sports league, and it was not for me. Okay. It's 4 a.m. mornings. It's, game days were 16, 17 hours long. It was I'm like, this is not, again, opportunity cost. Like, I can't, there's got to be something more than this. This is crazy, right? While you get the nice paycheck, where are you going to enjoy it? In your car, driving to and from work? That's it. So I realized it wasn't for me, and I wanted the stability, keyword, right, of the normal 8 to 5 thing. And if I chose to do the on-the-field sports thing, I could do it locally for some schools or a college or something like that. So that's what I did. I took the job, the nice little, $30K a year starting out, In 2004, that's not terrible, right?
That was a lot.
Nice little $30K starting out, little side gig, doing high schools, 8,500. So you're 22 years old, making almost 40. Like, I wasn't upset, But there was something inside of me that was like, is this really it?
What was that? Something? Was it a voice? Was it just a drive? What was it?
I don't know, but there was something in that moment. I remember as a 22, 23-year-old engaged working and going, is this really it? Like, is this what the American dream, this is what everybody talks about? Like, go to school, get a good education, go to work, get married, do all that. Is this really what it is? Because I feel like there has to be more. There has to be something that I'm actually contributing in some way. Other than just my work hours, right? Trading time for money, essentially. Now, was I impacting lives? Sure. The people that had the hip issue or the shoulder issue, and they got back to doing the thing that they love. Their back doesn't keep them from being intimate with their spouse anymore, and they can go back to work. They can do all those things. It's great personal satisfaction to help somebody in that type of situation get better. And I was good at it. I was really good at it. But something was missing. And then you get the things that I remember telling my mom, like, something just doesn't feel right. Like, I just don't. She's like, oh, but you're so good at what you do.
We always hear that. Yeah.
I'm like, yes, I understand that I'm good at what I do.
That doesn't mean I want to do it.
Right. It doesn't mean that I'm satisfied doing it. Yes. And then I was really dissatisfied with the quantity over quality situation that was healthcare at the time. Like, I remember, 25 people, 30 people being packed on the schedule, for me to treat. A lot of times you're juggling 4 or 5 patients at a time, and it just became like this is something's off. So this just doesn't make sense to me. Right. And the more I tried to institute change, the more I got the, oh, well, you have to realize that we're in a day and age where, the corporate response, we're in a day and age where, while people are getting laid off, we're still hiring and we're still moving through and we're still generating income, and you should just be happy that you have a job. Oh, and by the way, how much more can you take on? I'm like, are you shitting me right now? It just, so I became really calloused to what healthcare was in that moment.
And that the thing that drove you over the edge, or was there another catalyst that said, okay, I need to make the change?
Yeah, no, I think that was kind of it. It was it always took longer to get the pay raises that you deserved, right? There was always some reason why you had to keep doing what you were doing. You couldn't expand and do anything else. And usually it was pointed directly to your credentials. Oh, well, you don't have enough education. You don't have enough. And that's one of the things that when I hear some of my clients tell me now, I'm like, stop it. Like nobody cares. Tell me one grade from one class and the name of the teacher in one sentence, and I'll tell you that class was worth something to you. And not many people can do it.
Exactly.
And, but if I had to pick one incident, I remember we had in this particular center, we had a large room that was just being used for storage. They had considered putting an MRI center inside this room so they could do imaging in-house. Okay. But it was never going to happen.
Right.
So I, being the sports guy, I was like, hey, why don't we don't have a transition right now. Like, we're seeing people off their insurance for physical rehabilitation. We get them well. We move them through all of the exercises they need to get them back, but then we don't transition them into life-related stuff.
Right.
If I'm a 17-year-old pitcher who just had Tommy John surgery, like, I need to throw a baseball, and I need to do it under the supervision of somebody that can correct body errors and functionality problems, not just a pitching coach, right? And so I had this idea to, let's turn this into a sports performance thing, because what we can do is now we'll have to charge people cash for it because it's not going to get covered. But it still keeps them in our system. We no longer have to see 30 people, because if we're going to take 25, 30% of them and transition them into this new program, then they're going to pay cash for. It's a cash generating system. You don't have to increase quantity. You just give better outcomes, better quality.
In business, we refer to that as a continuity plan.
Exactly.
You have MRR, monthly recurring revenue, based on just keeping them in the system. Right. So you work so hard to create a client, to bring a client on board. Even if you're servicing them, you're rendering them an excellent outcome. Right. In the case of what you were describing, it's like, now I have to go right back to the drawing board and find a new client. So instead of doing that, you're saying, hey, let's come up with a great idea to keep the clients we already have staying within our ecosystem, continuing them, teaching them, guiding them, helping them grow, even beyond where they were when they got the outcome we've originally delivered.
Exactly. And that's one of the biggest things that I teach some of my clientele today. I'm like, what are you doing to maximize revenue per patient instead of just seeing them for a copay, billing, insurance? See you again in 6 weeks, 6 months, 2 years, whatever. Right? What are you doing to keep them in your circle? And so this was something that I thought would be really, really great to keep our patients in our circle. And then who doesn't want to be trained by the person that just spent 6 months with you helping you get over your rotator cuff surgery? Like, who doesn't want to continue to work with that person? And so this is the thing. So this makes me laugh every time I think about it. So put together a proposal. See how many docs would be on your side. So I go talk to the physicians, right? We have 100 physicians in this total
clinic.
Not our clinic, but just the company.
The company.
There's probably 6. So I get everybody is on board. Yeah, sure, love it, great idea. Put together a proposal. I don't get to present the proposal. I have to give it to the rehab manager to present it at the doctor's meeting.
On behalf
of me. So I give it to them. They present it. The doctors love it. But we can't pull Daniel out of the clinic to do this thing because he's too valuable to patient care directly.
Oh, my goodness.
So we're going to hire a third party to come in and do it instead of letting the guy who made the proposal and came up with the idea do it.
Wow.
And so my immediate reaction is in 4 letters, fuck you.
Yeah, exactly. Right?
And so from there on, I was just like, I'm out. Like, I cannot do this corporate level trash anymore.
Right.
And so I turned in the 4-week notice and found another job in medical sales, of all things, which sparks the road to entrepreneurship.
Okay. So this is where I get excited, because now I can see the path that you're going on.
Yep.
I can see the transition point. Help the audience understand what those first few moments were, though, in the sales platform. Like getting, like, what was that like for you?
Definitely very different. I remember the first job when I applied for it. I remember Scott Chowinski was on the phone with me. He's one of the owners of the business, which is rare. You don't get to talk to the owners of the business.
Not often.
So he calls me and he says, well, tell me about your sales experience. I'm like, well, I don't have any experience selling a product per se, but as a therapist, I have to sell myself and my treatment plans on a regular basis, and I think it's wildly harder to sell myself as a person than it is to sell the benefits of a product. He's like, I've been doing sales for 30 years. That's the best answer I've ever heard from a non-salesperson. I was like, thanks.
There you go.
So there was the job. But, because most healthcare individuals, and I hear it all the time, I don't want to be salesy. I'm like, this is not 80s used car sales.
Exactly.
Here. This is selling based upon the idea that what you have can benefit your patients, your clients, whoever it may be. And so that was my first, how old was I at that point? Early 30s, right? And or right at 30, having my first sales job and really learning to love that and make those connections and find out, not so much can I just sell you something to sell you something, but how do I serve you with the products that I have, and do they help your patients or your office run better or give you better outcomes? If they don't, then I'm not going to sell it to you, right? And I think this is where sales gets a bad rap.
Well, there are definitely people who are in the convincing mode. So when it comes to sales, you, in my opinion, I think you really have two paths you can go down. You can go down the convincing path or the persuasion path. Convincing is basically trying to get them to adopt my beliefs and my decision on what the outcome should be, and just push them either through sheer effort, repetition, browbeating, whatever it may be. That's the used car salesman type of approach. Whereas persuasion is simply going through a dialogue with someone, helping them to uncover what they already know to be true, and the solution that we have is a valuable solution. Because at the end of the day, if you can diagnose a problem and you have the remedy for the problem, you have a moral obligation to share it. So it's no longer quote-unquote sales, it's solutions providing.
I love it. I love the moral obligation, right? Because, and this is, I hear this all the time, it feels unethical to sell to people who come to my practice and want their insurance to pay for everything. And I'm like, okay, since we're going to talk about morality and ethics, right? Is it more or less unethical to sell somebody a product that they have to pay cash for that could directly influence their behavior or their health? And everybody stops and thinks about it. And they're like, well, I guess it is more unethical not to sell it to them. And I'm like, okay. Yeah, but I just don't want to be salesy. Jesus bless. Are you kidding me? Like, it is a revolving door of people who just don't understand how valuable that skill set is.
Exactly. And again, all you have to do is just ignore the word sales. Just talk, learn about the situation, say, oh, interesting. And then look back into what you have within your repertoire. I have something that can solve that.
Right.
And that's it. You don't have to say, do you want to buy it? It's not you being active, because if you've done your job with regard to demonstrating you care about the person you're serving, you now understand what their situation is, and you literally have something that can provide them a solution, there is no sales that takes place.
Right.
All you're doing now is fulfilling, because they're going to ask. You're going to go through that process, and if you've done what you've set out to do, meaning truly get to know the person you're serving, know what their issues are, diagnose their problem. If you have the solution, all you need to do is share the fact that you have a solution.
Exactly.
And then they will come and ask you for the help. Assistance.
And I think there's a certain part of understanding the personality wheels too,
yes,
in that situation. Because there's some people like me, like, tell me what it is, how does it help me, and then I'll tell you yes or no and get out of my office, right? But there's some people who want to know all the technical jargon, how does it affect, right? And then there's some people that want the hugs and the feel goods as a part of. So I think that if you're not adjusting your sales approach based upon the person that you're talking to, and you think you can be persuasive in the same way to everybody, it doesn't work. Right? You have to educate yourself on human psychology and understand, not to manipulate, but understand how people receive information.
Exactly.
And if you have something that can actually benefit them or their clientele, then you need to move it to them. You are living in morality if you are moving
100%.
something that can help someone. You are unethical if you're moving something just to move it so you can get paid.
Exactly. And that's I think a big difference too. If you're sitting in that experience with that other party and you're hungry for the sale, that comes through. And ultimately that's the thing that repels a lot of people. It gives people just this bad vibe about the experience they're going through.
Sure.
And that's what they associate with salesy. In reality, that's not even sales. That's literally browbeating something that's not of value to the recipient.
Him.
Exactly.
Or her.
Exactly. When you look at this now journey, you're cultivating your sales experience. You're going through the process. Are you gaining mentorship at this point?
Yeah, definitely. From some of the greatest people that I've ever had the opportunity to work with.
Okay.
Most of this company was based out of New Hampshire, and the group that they put together was a very high-level team of individuals that really had vision as it related to the products that they wanted to move and who they wanted to help, which was really, really great. They had a very specific niche in the marketplace that they wanted to go after. They had a very specific demographic and psychographic as a part of that niche, and they stuck to it. They didn't just say, go sell it to anybody and everybody who wants it. Right? They said, this is the person.
Okay.
Right? So not anyone, everyone, but this person.
This person.
Which is highly effective, right?
It is.
And part of branding, which I feel is some of the most important stuff. We've talked about this before, some of the most important things out there in any business. But so I got a lot of sales conversation from these guys. I got to meet a lot of really great people and excelled quickly. Like I moved into middle management in like 90 days.
Wow.
Of being with that group.
Okay.
Which was really great. And then inside of a year, they asked me to head up another division of the business that they were opening in the orthobiologics land. So what we were doing previously was post-operative care. So what's called a CPM. So if you have a knee replacement, it helps move your leg for you.
Oh,
so if you're in pain, it just helps keep that mobility and it doesn't allow you to stiffen up where you get frozen joints and then you have to have another procedure to fix that. We did TENS units. You may be familiar with those little pads that cause that. And we did cold compression therapy, help with swelling and stuff, which now the research tells you not to do. But in that time, that's what we were moving. Well, they wanted to move into more of the orthobiologics. So they wanted to do bone grafting. They wanted to do regenerative medicine and stem cell therapy.
Interesting.
Right? And plates, screws, that kind of stuff. So, and they said, this is right up your alley because what you did previously was in orthopedics. Who do you know? And I was like, there's 90 some odd doctors in the old practice I used to work with that, still have good connections to. So that pushed me into that, which also ended up pushing me into the first entrepreneurial step too, because it fell apart and it fell apart quickly.
Oh, okay. Well, let's talk about that then.
Right.
So what caused the fall?
So we teamed up with another business to do the billing portion of these orthobiologics.
Okay.
And they screwed the pooch on that. I think I still have the bills from when I worked there, from the stuff that I sold and moved. And I think I'm still owed something like $50,000-$60,000 in commission.
Wow.
Like it's crazy. But we got into some bad partnerships and they bled the business. But luckily, as the director of that branch, I had all the connections from all of the vendors that we used.
Okay.
So all of the plates and screws, all the bone grafts, all the stem cell products, like I had all of those connections. And the scary part at the time was I had just got married in October, and this happened in January. The business washed. I was like, oh God. Wow. So I remember
that's not a good wedding present.
Not at all. I remember being at home and being like, shit. So I text my wife and I was like, hey, give me a call when you get a second. And so my wife is a physician. So she calls me and I was like, so check this out. And she goes, okay, well, what are you going to do? I said, what do you mean? She's like, I know you already have a plan. What are you going to do? And I went, well, you do know me well. So I have all the contacts with all the distributors, so I was thinking about just firing up an LLC and just selling the shit myself. She was like, sounds good. What do you need from me? And I was like, nothing right now. She was like, all right, well, go do it. Let me know if you need anything. Click, bye.
Wow.
So I set the LLC up that day. I went on to like Vistaprint and got a logo, did all the things, ordered the business cards, called all the distributors and just said, hey, I'm thinking about doing this. Would you guys be up for it? Yeah, we'll send you all the agreements. Boom, boom, signed them. By that day, I think it took me like 6 hours and I got everything situated. Bam. And then, so once I got all that together, I just went back to all my contacts and started moving products and doing all the stuff myself. I cleared 6 figures in like 7 months worth of work that year.
Wow. Wow. So I'm curious. So I had a discussion recently with another business owner, and we were talking about the concept of entrepreneurism and whether or not it's something that you're born with or you can develop.
Right.
Because you literally flipped a switch and became an entrepreneur.
Right.
So my question was that always there for you? Or is it something that you learned and just grew into?
You know, it's funny. So my mom brought this up to me when I first started I forget which business it was. I've owned 3 or 4 of them now. But she brought it up to me and she goes, I remember you saying that you could see yourself running your own clinic or running your own business or having your own such and such by the time you were 40. And I was doing it well before that.
Right.
And I was like, I said that? She said, yeah. I said, I don't remember saying that. I don't remember saying that. I knew that there was something in me that was bound or destined to do something different than just trade my time for money as an employee. But I don't think I really knew what it was.
Right.
And having the opportunity to have a little bit of freedom in my schedule and my time, so that decision was made in 2015, like that first business. And I told myself when I started that, I was like, I will never go work for anybody else ever again. And I haven't.
Yeah.
And you're talking about 8 years worth now, right?
Now, there's nothing wrong with being an employee.
Definitely not.
Because obviously, in the grand scheme of things, there are way more employees than there are business owners. And employees actually help the functioning of a business operate correctly. If structured the right way and the right systems and processes and procedures in place.
100%.
But there is definitely something different about an entrepreneur. When you look at most entrepreneurs, like just imagine close your eyes, everyone who's listening and watching this, close your eyes and just picture the word entrepreneur. Like, what is it that you see in your mind? What is the quality of that person? What are they doing day in and day out? And you seem to be able to flip it right at the right time and in the right cadence because you put it into practice pretty quickly. What do you attribute that capability to?
The only entrepreneur that I know in my family was my grandfather.
Okay.
Him and his brothers had a bricklaying business.
Okay.
They built homes, shopping centers, all the things. But I didn't really, as a kid, I didn't put like entrepreneur to that. Like they were bricklayers. That's what they did. But they had their own business. They did their own thing, but they never talked about it.
Okay.
And I wasn't educated on it. I didn't know much about it. I knew that there was something inside of me. And for me, the word entrepreneur means a creative person who decides to use their skills to elicit change. Right?
Okay.
That's what that is to me. And so in that moment, I was like, well, let me be creative. And it wasn't necessary to elicit change in an industry or change in the world, so to speak, from like a visionary standpoint.
Right.
But it was like, how can I get creative, create my own revenue, and create my own time freedom, right? So that was where my mindset was.
Change your own life.
Right. It was more about me in that moment and satisfying myself. Now, as I've matured as an entrepreneur, it's more about changing the world or changing the dynamic or changing a culture or changing a community, right, by using creative skill sets to do so. Right?
But in that moment, you were taking a risk.
Sure.
And you were jumping into a pool that you didn't know what the depth of the pool was. You didn't know how long it was going to take you to get to the other side if you were swimming.
No clue.
What was that experience like from a fear standpoint? Was fear part of the equation for you, or you just literally just jumped in?
Oh, it's terrifying. Anybody who tells you it's not terrifying is a liar. Like, it's absolutely terrifying. And it's not the only thing that's terrifying is like, what if I do this and I fail?
Oh, yes.
That's the only question you're thinking of yourself. What if I do this? If I put all this work and all this effort into it and I fail, then what? Right? And that's where grit is found, right? That is where the entrepreneurial spirit is found. That's where you become the next best version of yourself, is inside of the failure, right? It's great to have successes and celebrate them, but the failure is the thing that determines whether or not you will be successful or not, or how you handle the failure, right? I know that now, but back then I was like, well, if it doesn't work, I can always go back to.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So in that mindset, you're still tethered to something else.
You haven't burned the bridges. Right. You haven't burned the boats. You're not you haven't cut off option B.
Exactly.
If it's only option A and that's the only option you have, you keep going down that path.
And you'll put 100% of your fight into that, right? But if you're like, if it works, it doesn't work. It doesn't work. It's great. And I can always go back. Then you're not going to be able to dive in.
That's where it comes down to having commitment to something and also being decisive, meaning making a decision and then going down that path. And then just dedication, that whole disciplined approach to living life, whether it's waking up at whatever time it is that you're doing it, making sure you're doing whatever needs to be done in the business, being the first one in, last one out, that sort of thing. When you look at this initial entrepreneurial journey that you jumped into, the first 7-8 months was amazing because you had amazing cadence, amazing growth. But what was the issue? Because I know that there was a challenge there.
Yep.
So what happened?
Yeah. So we built a 6-figure business with some doctors based upon a program, like an MSO type of program, right, management services organization. And then come to find out that the company that I built it with, their legal team was incorrect about the state laws.
Oh, goodness.
So everybody was pissed, and the doctors made no money. And I went from collecting, $20,000 paychecks every month to collecting $2,000 paychecks every month because nobody would order anymore because there was no longer a reason for them to take part in it because they didn't get their piece of the pie. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's like a gut punch, right?
Yeah, huge one. And so you're like, all right, what do I do? How do I pivot?
Okay.
Right? What is next? And kind of a weird situation. My wife and I at the time had talked extensively about having a business in healthcare that combined rehab and regenerative medicine or stem cell therapy, which is a big buzzword now.
Yes.
So we had this conversation, and I was like, you know what? Let's just do it.
Okay.
Let's go build it. She was unhappy at the center she was working at, and obviously I'd had this situation happen. I was like, you know what? Let's just go do this. Let's stop talking about the thing. Let's go do the thing. So we opened it. We opened it in Orlando in 2017. We had a beautiful 5,500 square foot facility that had rehab, right? So here I am back in the rehab world.
Yeah,
I have a team of people with me this time. It's not just me providing the
But
treatment.
you were back in.
I'm back in.
Okay.
Right? Thought I still had a love for it at that time.
Yeah.
Right? So we jumped back in. We built that beautiful space, did it as a franchise at the time. I mean, the space was gorgeous. And then we have the doctor's office next door to it. So the whole space, total 5,500 square feet. Rehab 3,000, doctor's office 2,500.
Okay.
The doctor's office still exists to this day and does well.
Okay.
The rehab center we got rid of.
Uh-oh.
We'll go down that story. But the idea was, hey, this is a huge risk. This is a town where nobody knows us. We were in Atlanta earlier. So
beforehand, yeah.
So if we'd stayed in Atlanta, we could have built this and been wildly successful just like that. But we'd had a string of just some uphill battles in Atlanta, and I had been in Atlanta for 20 years, and she'd been there for, I think, 10, and we were finally like, you know what, let's get the hell out of this
time to make a transition.
Right. Again, I grew up transitioning every 2 or 3 years, and so after staying in central Georgia for 20 years, I was like, I got to get the hell out of here. Let's go. So we did the Orlando thing. We built the center. And again, you don't know what you don't know until you start building something different each time. Right? So building a sales company that relies on products and connections, very different than building a center that is 80% cash pay.
Oh, yeah.
And people have to come in and spend their money on something that insurance pays for steroid injections, medications, and surgeries, right? And insurance also pays for physical therapy in the traditional sense if you want to be one of 55 people being treated in any given day versus our center did one-on-one. So we had a very different dynamic, very much a concierge type of service when it came to the business that we built, right? So
I'm really interested in diving down a bit of a tangent here with you, because I know you have an amazing depth of expertise in this subject matter, and it has to do with insurance. Because I think that as business owners, most business owners have no clue,
right?
Not just what insurance is, but how it even works, like how to incorporate it and what's important. I'm curious, what is your take? Because there's so much challenge right now in the concept of insurance and what the shortfalls are. I have a lot of my own personal opinions about insurance and the challenges with insurance companies, but I want to get your take, because again, you have such a breadth and depth of knowledge in this subject matter.
Yeah. So it's not just business owners that don't understand insurance. Everybody who carries insurance doesn't understand insurance or how it works. My personal opinion, if you want something really brash, is that insurance is the reason why healthcare sucks. So, because this is what happens. The insurance companies have contracted rates for your specialty. Okay. So let's say that you are an orthopedist. Okay. So that means you do surgery on head, shoulders, elbows, knees, and toes, right? Okay. So the insurance company gets to dictate when you can do the surgery.
Meaning what time?
No, when as in...
Oh, when in the treatment plan.
Right. Okay. So they want to know first, if I am the healthcare provider,
right,
and I am saying this person needs surgery, the insurance company can come back and say, well, we're not going to pay for it until they've had this MRI, they've taken this shot, they've taken this medicine, they've done 6 weeks of rehab. But as the provider, I'm telling you,
expertise.
The insurance company says, oh, sorry, we don't have to pay for that.
Wow.
So you have to jump through all these hoops first. Okay. And
oftentimes unnecessary.
Yes, oftentimes. And if you want to go to war with them, it's like a 3-hour phone call just to have somebody listen to you to say, this is the problem, we need to do surgery. Okay? So, and then they negotiate rates for reimbursement. So a lot of you see what's called an EOB. Right? You go to your healthcare provider, you have a procedure or you have an office visit. They send you a thing in the mail that says EOB, explanation of benefit. Okay. So basically it shows what the office billed, what the insurance will pay for. It's not a bill. It's just an explanation of. So a lot of people will see, okay, I had a ACL surgery and I billed $10,000 for it. Well, the contracted rate for your ACL surgery is actually $2,300. So just because I billed it doesn't mean I'm getting $10,000. I'm actually, or $10,000. I'm getting $2,300.
Wow.
Right. So if you take that and apply it to your experience in the doctor's office now, you go to the doctor and you wait for how long?
Right, because you're not getting a $10,000 experience. You're getting a $2,300 experience.
Exactly. Or just a regular office visit. I'm sick, right? I got a cold. I need to go to medicine, or my kids have strep throat, whatever it is, right? So you go and you wait for an hour to be seen for 5 minutes, to be handed a prescription, kicked out the door, and bang, 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 bang. And people complain, right? Oh, well, this is, what is this? You know, it's
what insurance has done to the healthcare
what your insurance is paying for. That's exactly what has happened. Now, is there a whole other side to where doctors' offices are just taking that without doing anything about it? Of course there is. Right. We can have that conversation. But the biggest problem is that as a consumer, if you don't understand what your insurance company is doing to healthcare and you bitch about it, and then you come to a place like my office where I take predominantly cash.
Right.
Well, why doesn't my insurance pay for this? Dear God.
Exactly.
Like, you can't have one. You know what I mean? Like, you don't get both.
Right.
Your insurance either pays for it and you get a shitty experience, or you pay cash and you get a primo experience. Which one would you like to have?
Exactly.
Right? It's very difficult to use your insurance and have a great experience at a doctor's office. And it's all because of the reimbursement rates are so low that these physicians or healthcare providers have to increase their volume just to be able to pay the bills. Right.
Because the overhead in a medical practice is
usually
huge.
Closer to 70%. Yeah.
So when you're looking at it, your cost of insurance as your E&O, your like basically just to protect yourself from lawsuits, malpractice insurance, et cetera, all of those things are so through the roof that the only way to survive and make a reasonable profit for the effort and energy it took to become a medical provider, because there's a lot of schooling involved, there's a lot of painstaking processes you have to go through to do that. The only way to make a reasonable living is to do it under volume or to switch to a cash-oriented practice.
Exactly. Or the other side of that is, one, you can renegotiate your insurance rates. It's a pain in the ass, but you can do it.
You can.
Right? And then two, stop increasing quantity and increase the amount of revenue per patient by selling to them.
Exactly.
I don't understand that, right? So we want to improve our customer service, but we don't want to improve the amount of money we make off of each person that comes through.
Exactly.
Right.
And again, it's adding value.
Exactly.
Because you're not just taking more money just to take more money. You're actually giving someone something of value. Because again, in a free market environment, two or more parties have to get together and agree that there's something called value exchange. And if value exchange doesn't exist, they don't voluntarily engage in commerce with one another.
Exactly.
So, I agree with you wholeheartedly that a lot of business owners, I'm not saying it's just medical providers, it's business owners in general, have a challenge with the concept of sales. You learned very early in your career path the value of sales and what the benefits of sales are for you as a provider of the sale process, and you also now growing into it from a business perspective.
Exactly.
So let's go back. You're now in this new environment. You're in Orlando. You're building out something that, quite frankly, would have probably been pretty much gangbusters from the get-go in Atlanta, but you're building out in an environment where people don't know you. How did you get the word out? Like, what did you do to share who you are and what you did?
Yeah, hired some really bad marketers.
A lot of business owners do that.
So hired some really bad marketers. Relied too heavily on the franchise company to participate in what we were doing, which they did not. It's different if you open a Chick-fil-A. Right? Chick-fil-A's got a big brand. I open up a smaller rehab facility that doesn't have a big brand across the U.S. It's a little different marketing situation that you have to pay attention to, right? But in the midst of that, it's not. I never had to market for a actual healthcare practice.
Right.
I never had to do that. And so what we did was go back to just the grassroots marketing. We go pounding pavement, knocking on doors, right? Hey, we're so-and-so. We have this brand new practice, blah, blah, blah. Oh, you guys accept insurance? No, we're cash pay. What? I can't send my patients to you. Why not? Well, because they already complain about a $40 copay. I'm like, well, they complain about a $40 copay because there's no value that they're getting. Like, people don't, like you mentioned earlier, value proposition, right? People don't say no to something because of the cost. Right. They say no because the perception of value for the cost isn't there.
Correct.
Right. So this is where most people make the mistake, right?
Cost is what they pay.
Right.
Value is what they receive.
Get. But most people make the mistake of doing what? Well, I'll bring my cost down. Well, no, just bring your cost up and give more value. People will buy. But it's in that moment, you just, again, pounding pavement, knocking on doors, getting rejected. I had people in the time say, like, oh, it sounds like your practice is just for the elite. And I was like, what does that mean, the elite?
Exactly.
Like, if your dog got hit by a car and was going to cost $8,000 to fix his back, would you pay for it? You wouldn't ask me twice about your insurance, would you?
Exactly.
Right? So why do we value my car, my dog, my stuff, right, over my own personal health if my insurance doesn't pay for it?
Exactly.
Right? And this is one of the things that just gets under my skin. I'm like, you will pay to have the 75th T-shirt that you don't need, but when I tell you it costs $250 to come see my doctor for an hour, you scoff at that. My insurance is going to pay for that? Really? Come on.
Yeah.
And
it's perception.
It is.
And perspective. I mean, if we continue to have a generally uneducated populace with understanding what really matters in life, you're going to get responses like that.
Right.
Let me go buy the 250th T-shirt, as opposed to let me spend an hour with someone who can make me feel so amazing that I can go out and create value for someone else and have now more money to buy not only the 250th T-shirt, 500th T-shirt.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, it's short-sightedness, I think, a lot. And
that's programming too.
It is programming. It definitely comes down to education, what you've been exposed to during the entirety of your life, and how you adopt that philosophy and those value systems within your daily practice of living. When you look at this enterprise, then you're getting the word out slowly because you're doing it door to door, if you will.
Yep.
What was the transition like in that business then? Because how quickly did you get it off the ground?
Yeah. So the answer is that the physical therapy portion never really got off the ground.
Never got off the ground. That's
right. I mean, we had some great months. We did a phenomenal job filling up one therapist, right? One therapist, and then I only treated half time. So, and the idea was to have 4 full-time therapists and then me as a part-time.
Okay.
And we never really got there. I think also there's some other things that went into it. I think we were really early in the town that we were in. The town we were in was it had the psychographics and demographics of the type of person we wanted to work with, but the town was new, right? So the volume wasn't quite there. And so from a physical therapy standpoint, I think we were doing amazing in 2019. Like we were on this growth. We circled 2020. We're on this growth. It's slow, but it's growing. It's slow, but it's growing. COVID.
Boom.
So COVID hits.
The world shuts down.
Right.
You shut down.
Yeah. So from a physical therapy standpoint, that's close proximity and not knowing much about the virus other than, it's going to destroy the entire world, we made the decision to close it. And so we sold off the space, right? Sold the equipment. And you want to talk about hard, like that, to know that was one of the first things that I had built and spent time building. And, we got 3 years into it and we were right there, right there. And then just boom, that was it. So that was super hard to do, but I will say, looking back on it, it was a blessing in disguise because what it allowed us to do was not retract on what we did from a doctor's perspective during COVID.
Okay.
So at that time, I think we were probably doing right around $500,000 in revenue, right? Okay. Which is not great for that type of practice. And so I told my business partner, I said, this is what we're going to do. I said, we're going to shut this. We're going to save a shitload of money. We're going to get somebody to take over the lease. So we pivoted, boom, done, pivot. Get that off our plate. And we're going to go hard in the midst of COVID into what we do from a medical standpoint. We're going to double down on marketing. Okay. We're going to spend a little extra money in the front, but we're not going to, we weren't required to shut the doors.
Right.
And so I said, we're not going to retract. And so the second quarter was junk. And then as soon as the third quarter turned around, all of that paid off. Wow. And we grew 50% in 2020 because of that pivot. Okay. 50%.
It's not just the pivot, though. You made a decision to take action.
Right.
And the action was capture market share, right?
Yep.
Because you went out and you put dollars behind your activity. That pivot created an opportunity for you to get major foothold in that environment. So tell me more about that.
Yeah, I think a lot of people were really, really within the market itself, right? They were, I'm not going to go anywhere. I'm not going to do anything. Right. Well, and also, our niche client is a 40-60-year-old male, female who's got 250 net income. In that bracket, a lot of these people already work from home. Or they're executives, right? So a lot of them now don't have to go to an office. They're working from home. They have time to put into their health.
Exactly.
Right? They value health. They value shopping at places like Whole Foods. They value nutritional guidance. They value exercise. So all we had to do was just go talk to those people.
Exactly.
And they came in.
Wow.
And they came in by the truckloads. And we grew 50% in, call it 6 months, because we were essentially shut. I mean, we're not shut, but the revenue took a dive in quarter 2 because of COVID. But in the last part of the year, boom, grew. And then 2021 grew another almost 35%.
Wow.
And so it just keeps going. And then this year we've toppled our revenue from last year in the first 9 months of the year this year.
Wow.
Right? So a lot of that just goes into understanding who it is that you serve, right? And speaking their language and making it familiar, right? Not valuing the almighty dollar, but valuing the almighty change that you want to elicit on a certain type of individual or a certain community, as I mentioned earlier. I know we're going to break that down a little bit more, but it was quite the thing to close one and have that pain, but then to also say, okay, this is what we're going to do. Right. And this is why we need to do that. So I took a role of no longer treating, being the hands-on provider, which again, you don't want to treat anymore. You're so good at it. Ugh, shut up. I dove hard into learning more about my own business self. Actually, I started that way before we closed those doors, but I started diving hard into how do we better market? How do we develop a better sales channel, both internally and externally? Right? How do we improve the website? How do we get better social media? How do we do these things? I started taking course after course, reading book after book, finding all the mentors and, following all the places I needed to follow on social media to learn the things that I needed to learn to be able to put that into place. Right?
It's amazing what you can do when you stop working in the business and you start working on the business.
True.
And that pivot for you gave you the opportunity to do just that.
Yes.
You could step out from the day-to-day stuff and work on it. When you look at the metrics, because you brought up a very, very valid and very critical point, and that's understanding your avatar, your ideal client, understanding who they are, what they look like, how they dress, where they shop, what they do for social interaction. Like understanding the entirety of who it is that you serve helps you to communicate with them. How did you go through that process of developing that ideal avatar for yourselves?
Yeah, I think so if healthcare in general, let me back this up a little bit. So healthcare, the idea of healthcare is that, you walk in, you wait, you get seen for a minimum amount of time, and then you get pushed out the door, see you again soon.
That's the traditional notion of it.
That's typically what we go through, right? Name any other business on the planet that runs like that would survive.
None.
There is none, right? So what that means is that because we're healthcare providers, we've taken for granted.
It's a need.
Right, because it's necessary.
Yeah.
Right? So if you just build a practice, let's say you're going to build a GI practice, right? So we're going to treat anyone and everyone with butt and gut issues. That's what we're going to do, right? If you got butt and gut issues, come see us. And that's what they do. And so you have everything from this type of individual all the way to this type of individual.
Exactly.
Right? Of, color, creeds, and kinds, and financial backgrounds, and different needs, desires, all the things.
Exactly.
Right? And if you do that, then you end up being just like everybody else, right? If in marketing and branding.
You're the generalist in that,
right. You're
specific niche.
Yeah, elbows are sharp, right? You're in red ocean water,
Yep.
right? So as we call it in the branding and marketing world, red ocean water, where you're not seen, you're just covered up. So if you really want to develop something, especially in healthcare, that stands out or puts you in blue ocean water, then you have to identify who it is that you actually serve, right? We're not going to just
down to the very, very fine details.
All of it, right? Not just demographically, like where do they live, how old they are, how much money they make. Those are all important. But the biggest question is what do these people want out of their healthcare experience? Exactly. It's the psychographics, right? What do they want, and what do they want to avoid? Right? And so for the CEO, small business owner, or executive, what's the biggest commodity that they're in short supply of? Time. So you will not wait more than 3 to 5 minutes to be seen in our office from the time of your appointment.
That by itself is a selling point, right there. I'm converted.
You ever done this? You ever walked in and you're laptop and you're in this little chair and you're like, oh, I'm waiting for an hour. And this is you. This is your position, right? And this is what you do uncomfortably because you're working your ass off, right?
Yep.
And we wanted to appeal to that person. Now, do we get shunned because of that sometimes? Sure.
Yeah.
Right? But I know who I'm for.
Oh, 100%.
Because I'm you.
Exactly.
I am my ideal client.
Yeah, I can't tell you the amount of times that I've been in a waiting room with my wife. We're sitting down, we're going through something, we have the kids with us or whatever it may be, and it's like the appointment was 45 minutes ago, and they haven't even said hello. Like, what's going on? And then you get transitioned to the actual treatment room, and you're waiting there too.
Yes.
It's like insane. Yes. So yeah, if you can cut that out, that's a huge selling point.
And that is so. That was one of the things. What are the top 2 things that people complain about? One is the amount of time that I have to spend in the doctor's office, and the second one is still time related. It's how much time I get with my doctor.
The quality of the interaction.
Exactly. So there's no sliding glass. I love those offices. You walk in, it's like a jail.
Yeah,
yes?
exactly.
You gotta have some special passcode to be here. I hate that. Get rid of that. If you're a doctor's office that has that shit, get rid of it, please.
Yeah.
But you get greeted, you get offered water, coffee, right? So it feels elite.
It's a social experience.
Right, and it feels familiar to you, right? And you get taken back on time. If it's your first time, you're going to spend anywhere from 20 to 30 minutes with a physician. 20, 30 minutes. That's it.
Wow.
Right? Like you don't get 5 to 8, which is what we used to do at our old practice.
I think that even that was long.
Right?
I mean,
but 20 to 30 minutes of actual time, answering questions, developing a plan, right? Being part of that plan.
Yes.
Right? And then you get out on time.
Yes.
You no longer have to burn a half a day. Right, and you get your questions answered, right? Especially if it comes to things like bone, muscle, joint, and spine, because most people who've had pain, they don't know why they have pain, or they're not educated enough to know what they should do to help with the pain. Instead, they just get pumped full of steroids, pain medications, right? They do some physical therapy, which is a great thing. There's no quick fix, right? You have to do the physical therapy. I don't care if you have surgery, have injections, or do what we do in stem cell therapy world. You still have to put the work in, you know? And so we cater to that type of person that understands the value of their own health. They want longevity, and they're willing to put that work in. There's nothing worse than, you know, doing a $5,000 procedure on somebody for them to call and say, it didn't work. Well, did you do your therapy? No. Why did we treat this person?
Exactly.
Right? That person should not have had the treatment in our office because they're not the ideal person, because psychographically
they won't follow through.
They're not going to follow through. Right? So I want a system of accountability, right? You get to hold me accountable to give you the best resources available to make a decision about your health care. And I'm going to hold you accountable to follow through with the decision you told me that you wanted to make. And healthcare offices don't do this.
No, not at all.
Not at all.
Like I'm trying to remember an experience in a healthcare environment that I've ever had anything like that. I can't think of one.
It doesn't happen.
Yeah. So that's one. It's just a remarkable change, because you're essentially taking an industry that needs a facelift and giving it a facelift.
Yes.
So that's where you are right now. That's what the existing business is like currently. What would you say the biggest challenges are that you still face? Because you've gotten through a lot.
Yeah. It's very, very easy as a business owner to value the revenue. It's very, very easy to get into that place. So, and when you get into that place, what happens is we start valuing people who can pay for our services versus people who should be paying for our services.
Right.
It's very, very easy to get into that space. And the reason is because you want to help people, right? You have compassion, you know.
Well, I don't know anyone who's gotten into healthcare that doesn't have that drive.
Exactly.
To make a difference in the people's lives that they touch.
Sure, and that's the reason that we're all here. There's usually some other underlying why, you know, like most oncologists have dealt with cancer on a personal level within their family, which is why they become like that's oftentimes a powerful why story, right? The same thing with me. I ended up in orthopedics because I tore my shoulder with 2 surgeries later, and I've had my ankle put back together too. Like it's now something that's part of me. I understand, right? But the issue is that if you don't value your health as a whole, and you're just looking for the next pill or the next shot or the next kick in the pants that makes you feel better, then you shouldn't be in my office. Right. And I want to have compassion for people who want to get better. But if I want it more than you do, and just because you can afford it doesn't mean I should give it to you. Right.
Real health is real wealth.
Exactly.
And it's the individuals who are committed to that outcome are the ones you want to partner with in their journey to that outcome.
Exactly.
When you look at the next, let's say, 5 years, where do you see this business going?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that. We definitely want to expand it, but the state of the economy right now says don't do that.
Right.
We had plans to get a second location open in 2023, and then a third one in 2025.
Okay.
With significant goals by 2028 to move and sell. But with the way everything is kind of changed, CPI data and all those things that have come through in the economy, your lovely Jay Powell raising rates and doing all the things, I'm like, it just doesn't make sense from a business standpoint to expand for us at this moment. Now, I'm hoping by the end of next year we see some turnaround in that. It's definitely a good time to invest in other stuff, though, right?
Yes.
if you're looking to pocket that revenue. But from an expansion standpoint, I want to be able to. It's not just about growing the business because we want to grow the revenue, right? The goal is to make money. For any business, your goal is to make money. It has to be. But it's not necessarily the mission of your business. The mission of your business is to influence lives, change communities, do whatever it is that is meaningful to you or near and dear to your heart. And there are too many people having unnecessary surgeries, who are addicted to pain medicines, who want something different. They want something better. They want some longevity, and they want to be long-term greedy with their health. And so I want to be able to help influence that. So for me, for our practice directly, it's all about having the opportunity to help people get over pain that has changed their lives in a way that they would have never imagined. You know, I used to do this, but now my back won't let me. I want to change that dynamic.
Right.
So we'll see in the next 12 months what happens. We just did a little bit of I dare to call it a rebranding ourselves, which if you are a business, especially in healthcare, you don't just make up your brand one time and that's what it sticks with. You have to continue to remodel it and change it and mold it. And so we just, my leadership team just a couple weekends ago, we all met in Daytona and we did a little thing. I brought in a third party. Mentors are important. People that can see the external. I brought in a third party person and we spent the first day ourselves. And then my guy Devo, I was like, I need you to come in and do what I do, but just do it better than I do. And so he came in and took our base and just really crafted a new message and a new brand style for us, which, and we're not going to change logos or anything like that, but we want to definitely change the language that we use on a regular basis so it directly translates as something familiar to our niche clientele. And if you don't do that, you're going to start inviting riffraff into your business.
Right.
So
I don't want to gloss past this.
Sure.
We talked a little bit about you mentioned a moment ago about the expansion effort potentially being on hold. I'm curious about the calculus that went into that decision-making process, because I think a lot of business owners are poised on that same decision right now. I mean, we're all living through the economy that's currently present.
Yeah.
And some of us are in a position, well, maybe it's time to expand, but maybe not, because I'm a little bit nervous. I'm just curious, like, what was the calculus you used to say, yes, it's right to hold off, or maybe we should venture into it? Like, what was the back and forth?
Yeah, I think it's hard to come to that realization that it's probably the right time real estate wise to make the move, but it may not be the right time consumer wise to make the move.
Okay.
Right, because people are going to again retract in dollars.
Yes.
And it's not like COVID where people can just transition to work from home and still get the same job done. Right? There's a retraction economically right now that while people are still spending because of inflation, but if the Federal Reserve Bank keeps raising rates, then that's going to come to a screeching halt. They're going to force a down economy. And
Powell basically came out and said he was doing that. I mean, at Jackson Hole, he said, listen, households and businesses are going to feel the pain.
Exactly.
So they're committed to that interest rate approach, at least now. I mean, potentially there could be a pivot on the horizon based on what's going on in Europe at the moment. Some changes in central banks around the world. We'll figure out whether or not the U.S. makes that pivot as well anytime soon. I'm not certain that would happen. But regardless of that pivot, like if you look back, historically speaking, at challenging times in our economy, it's usually during those challenging times that those businesses that do put more dollars into marketing and go through expansion and are interested in capturing market share, those businesses that do that actually tend to be the winners in the outset. So has that thought process gone through your head?
It definitely has. I think my feeling is more on the lines that we are 80% cash pay.
Yeah.
Right? And it's not often cheap to have some of these procedures done.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And so it's I worry about, I mean, geographically we're going to put them in a location where it would make sense.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
But I worry about the state of the economy and people retracting as a whole. Right? I think it's I view it as in a down economy, people are going to go spend their money where somebody else is paying, i.e. insurance. Right. Unless you have a smaller level commodity.
Yeah.
Right?
They may be more willing to suffer through the not seeing your doctor for the first 30, 45 minutes in the office and waiting and then only getting a minute and a half to 2 minutes with them. They may be willing to do that if their choice is only being able to do that versus like putting food on the table.
Right.
But the demographic that you're going after really isn't challenged in that same exact way.
Yeah.
I'm just curious why it would be something you would hold off on.
Yeah, it's probably more of a fear factor than anything else, right? It's another one of those steps into stretching yourself as a business owner. But there's also businesses are taking hits, like you mentioned. Like businesses are going to feel it. All these other places are going to feel it. And I'm like, is now the right time to put that risk in?
Yeah.
And the other question is when is it ever going to be a right time to take a risk?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because the dynamic there is that means everyone else who is potentially, quote unquote, a competitor is going through that same decision-making process.
Yeah.
And if everyone else is retracting and you're the only one else expanding, that gives you the ability to capture market share so that when things do turn, you're the one best positioned to take advantage of it.
Yeah. There's also I think a dynamic too with who's the doctor that you can hire.
True.
Right. So you have to have a very specialized physician. And we've been doing stem cell therapy in the spine on the East Coast longer than anybody else. Right. So I look at competition like
come on.
Come on.
Come at me.
We could build a center in Atlanta, we could build another one in Florida. We could go to Chicago. Like there's a lot of areas that we could go where we would be highly welcomed in certain communities. And I don't say that to be like, look at me. I say that because the opportunity is there. It's just who can you put in the position to do what it is that we do in the same way that we do it.
Right. So that's not necessarily an economic issue.
That's
a resource issue with regard to personnel and having the right capability and skill sets to be able to put into that dynamic to serve the community you want to be serving. So I totally get that as a limitation. That just means you have to do more research and get your name out and get more exposure so that the right providers of that type of care know who you are and the fact that there's an opportunity there.
Or you split them, right?
Depending on where you're located and how you can situate that.
Yeah, and so we've talked about that, as far as if we went into, say, like the Ponte Vedra area, right? So you get close to the WGV, the World Golf Village, and all that, you would have the opportunity to do so, and you'd only have a 2-hour commute back and forth. And also burnout's a real problem, right? As the operations guy inside of that business, I don't want to see my physician get smoked.
Exactly.
Right? And also, I think there's a certain amount of, as having a physician as a co-owner in this business, right? So she does some working on, right? And if I do that to her, I'm trapping her working in.
Yes.
Right? Until I found somebody to replace her who had the same skill set. And it's not just can I deliver a product, it's can I deliver an experience too.
Exactly.
It takes a lot there's a big difference between a Michelin restaurant and a 5-star restaurant.
Yes.
And it's extraordinary is that extra portion.
Yeah, that special ingredient is the experience.
Exactly. And so it's having that as a form of it as well. So in combination with economical change and all those, you start to go, should we do it? Should we stay? Should we do it? Should we stay?
Right.
And so I don't think there's a question of should we do it or not. I think it's a question of is now the appropriate time.
Exactly.
It's like, should we just hold a little bit and just wait and see what's going to happen and then say, okay, we're fine, let's go, or should we just stop completely? I think it's more of a holding pattern before we land the plane on the decision than it is a firm yes or no at this point. Okay. But it's a consideration of economy. Who do you hire, right? Where do you put it specifically? And again, how much money you're going to funnel into the marketing from that standpoint.
Well, I think that you've done an amazing job choreographing this entire enterprise. And I think the special sauce is that experience, the experience you're giving to your end consumer.
Indeed.
The individuals who are coming in to consume what you have to offer, they get an exceptional experience. They get something that they're not used to, sets you immediately off from any potential competitor. And you deliver. Not just do you give the initial experience, you deliver throughout that individual's journey with you. And then you're retaining them as well. But it's beyond just that at this point, because now you're not just doing it for yourself. You're teaching other business owners how to do this too.
Yes.
So tell me a little bit about that. Like, what is it that you're doing specifically in that area?
Yeah, it was funny. So I as I started diving into the business aspects and the things that I didn't know, right? So you learn, but you learn general business stuff, but you have to apply it to your field, right? Because there is such a difference in the way healthcare versus restaurant versus commodities versus finance. There's a difference in the little nuances of each field. So as you learn the business aspects and you start applying them, you start getting noticed. And as you get noticed, people say, "Oh yeah, Nasir, you guys are everywhere. Your marketing's everywhere." And I'm like, "That's right. I know it is because I'm doing it now. Damn it." And so the people, I realized that I was starting to get questions from other healthcare providers. Like, "Well, what do you think about this? And what do you think about that?" And I would give them just little nuggets. "Oh yeah, try this," and they go, "What is that?" And I got to realize,
they don't know any of this.
I'm like, "Wait a minute."
Common sense for me.
Right. I'm like, "Okay, wait a minute. So if you don't know, and I can help you, you should pay me to help you."
Right.
And so I was like, you know what? In the midst of 2020 and doing the revamping of the marketing and everything, I was like, let me just sit down. And I just happened to meet Raymond Aaron, which for those of you who don't know Raymond Aaron, he's authored over like 180 books. He's been part of some of the Chicken Soup books and all that too. Right. So, but he has his own publishing group, and I had the chance to meet him. And I was like, you know what? Let me use your group and write a book. He was nice enough to do the forward with me, which was great. And I just put together a full-on, like, this is, if you're going to build a private practice, right?
This is how to do it.
I don't want any of the bureaucracy and hospital systems. You guys can have all of that. Nobody wants to go to a hospital. It's an even bigger waste of time, right? Unless you have to have some major procedure. But for private healthcare systems, I'm like, these are the necessary steps that you need to take from the beginning in order to start off the right way. It's a lot cheaper to build it right than it is to pay somebody like me later to help you fix it. And so I just put together a whole, basically, initial branding. Like, this is how you want to formulate your office. This is the customer service. This is how you sell appropriately. This is the marketing that you want to use. This is the language. This is how you balance the finances on a very small structure so that you can pay your people and not have to do what I did and call my mom and borrow $15,000 to pay. Right? So that was us. That was definitely, I think it was like 2018 or something like that. We had some insurance checks or something like that didn't clear. And so if you want to know trials and tribulations, there's a big one right there. So I called my mom and I was like, "Can you do me a solid?
Help me, please."
Right. Please. I was like, "I need to, can you just throw me a few shekels? I'll give them back to you as soon as these checks clear." And we did, we paid her back within like 4 or 5 days, but it's just that phone call, that eating crow phone call. So it was important to me to include just a little bit of, hey, these are some bank accounts you need to consider constructing. This is how you need to separate your money. Stop just spending it endlessly because you feel like you need to have 6 staff members for one physician. You don't. Right. So just little things like that just really help people understand how to go about building this healthcare practice that you now want to venture into the entrepreneurial space, right? I think people confuse the idea that I'm a good healthcare provider, therefore I'll be a good business owner. And it doesn't work like that.
No, it does not work like that at all.
So it's a whole different skill set that you have to learn. You went to school for 8, 10, 12 years, some of you, to be healthcare providers. How many business people did the same thing? They may not have gone to school, but they went to hard knock school, right? And they learned through a lot of trials and tribulations how to build a business. And if you think for a second that learning business skill set is not something valuable to you, your business will fail.
Oh my goodness, it's critical.
Right.
You need to know what you don't know right now. So find the mentors to teach you.
Exactly.
Find the individuals who have been through it, and you can learn vicariously through them.
Exactly.
Now, is your book still available for?
It is. It's on Amazon. I've had some people get on me about trying to do it as an audiobook, and I have to create the time again. Time is the short commodity, right? Yes. But yeah, it's available on Amazon.
Okay. So I'll make sure that gets in the show notes so people can get access to it.
Yeah, I would appreciate that. Thank you.
When you look at your journey, you've been through a lot. You've gone through major trials and tribulations. You've gotten through them to the other side. You've built an amazing business that's thriving right now. It's poised to continue to thrive even through the challenging economic times we're going through. I often like to get involved in a thought exercise with our guests, and if you wouldn't mind indulging me, I'd like to take you down this quick little thought exercise. I'd like you to imagine for a moment that you have the ability to go back in time. With all the knowledge you have right now, part of who you are, and you go back in time and you're able to go at any point in time in your own lifetime, go back to meet an earlier version of you. Okay? And you only get to share with that younger version of you one thing. So my question to you is twofold. Who would you go back to visit, meaning what age would you be when you're visiting? What's going on in your life in that moment? And the second portion of that is, what do you share?
Yeah, I know exactly the moment too. Like it's and I've done this exercise before, so I knew where I would go back to. Let's do a little context. There are very few people that get to the end of their life and say to themselves, I regret doing ABC. Right? But there is a lot of people who have regrets for not doing certain things. And when I was 22, 23, 24, I started asking myself those questions. I started listening to everyone else say, oh, it's just what you're supposed to do, right? This is what you do. You work, you get married, you do these things, blah, blah, blah. That's what you do. This is what life is. Don't go to Hawaii. Don't take that job out there. You don't need to do that. Right. I would go directly back to that person and I'd say, don't ignore that feeling in your gut. Don't ignore that voice in your head because it's not wrong. And if you wait 10 more years, you'll still get there. And that's what I did. It took me 10 more years to decide to leave. I was there, 9. I was in that business for 9 years, asking myself all the time and going to people and saying, man, it's just how I'm feeling. This is how I'm feeling. I lost a relationship because I was feeling, I was told you I was engaged at the time. I lost that relationship because I was questioning. I gave up on other opportunities because I was questioning, and I listened to the wrong people.
Oh, yes. That happens often.
Right. So I would go back to that 22, 23-year-old version of myself and say, listen to that feeling. Go find people who understand it. Stop talking to your mom. Stop talking to your friends who don't get it. Yeah. Go find people that will understand what you're talking about and figure out what to do sooner, right? And not for any other reason than, we all have a unique ability, I believe, to affect the lives of entire communities.
Oh, yes.
And we're put here to give, right? And to give via our good work, right? And I think if you're just moving through life bitching about everything rather than doing something about it, you're not doing your good work.
I agree.
Right. So I would have told that person, step into your good work a lot earlier.
Powerful. The second portion of this thought exercise, though, is a little bit of the flip side.
Okay.
So imagine then for a moment that a future version of Daniel sits next to you on this couch right now, in this moment that we're experiencing today together, and he's going to tell you one thing. What does he share with you?
Yeah, actually something that I've been wrestling with is giving. I feel that that there's a entrepreneur tends to be this buzzword,
especially now.
Yeah, I've gotten to the point where I don't really like it. Like if you're a solopreneur, you own like your own little coaching business, and you're calling yourself a CEO, like bro, come on, like help me out here. But you become this not because you desire the boats and the cars and the fancy houses and all that. Like that's nice. Right, but it's also excessive, So I've been wrestling with who do I give to, right? How much do I actually need to live a life for my son and I that makes sense, as a single dad? Like, what is that lifestyle? What do I want to teach him? And then who do I want to get back to, right? What is the thing that I want to support in the community, right? Who is it that can use? If I make $3 million a year, do I need $3 million a year? I know, biblically, a lot of people say, we're only called to leave 10%. I'm like, yeah, but that's the bare minimum, right? You're going to do the bare minimum. Like if I make $3 million a year and the bare minimum, so what is that, $300,000? What am I doing with the other $2.7 million other than living in excess? Why do I need fancy cars and boats and all this stuff when there's people who don't have a home, a bed, food on a regular basis, So that's something that as you get into the upper echelons of revenue generation inside your business that I've really been wrestling with. Like, who do I give to? And I have also decided that I will not work with a lot of these other healthcare practices unless they know who they're giving to. Like, if you're just here because you want to create money and create this big lavish lifestyle for yourself, I'm out, bro. Like, I'm not your guy. Wow. And so if that future person comes back to me right now, he's going to say, keep on that path. Okay. Find that thing. What are you going to give to? Who are you going to support? What's the actual change that you can make, not just in the industry, but globally?
See, and I think that's there's a lot of different qualities of entrepreneurship. and there's a lot of different drives behind what motivates an entrepreneur to do certain things.
Right.
And I think you and I probably share a similar drive. And that's impact.
Yep.
Like for fulfillment for me is progress measured by the ability to have impact. So because again, once you get to certain revenue amounts, it's like, okay, it's no longer enticing. I mean, when I was younger, money was definitely enticing because I didn't come from money. So me getting access to large pools of capital on an annual basis was amazing. But the cachet of that definitely wore off pretty quickly.
Right.
Because once you have more than enough, it sort of doesn't even matter.
Right.
So I get that with regard to trying to figure out how you can continue to have an impact beyond just those that you're serving, but within your community and causes that you care about.
Exactly.
That's huge.
Yeah. I actually saw a soccer player, I forget, international soccer player, he plays for a German team, I believe. And he quoted the other day, he was like, why do I need 20 Ferraris and a huge house? He's like, I'm out here building schools and helping to, like, this dude makes millions, like these soccer players make millions and millions of dollars, right? Like, look at Ronaldo. How much money does this idiot make? You know, the stupid amounts of money. And what's every commercial that you see him in? Some fancy watch commercial, suit commercial, or cars. I'm like, what are you actually doing? I don't know if he's actually giving back. I'm not making judgments about him. I'm just saying, like how is it that you're, as a, whatever your craft is, whether you're an athlete, a business owner, or just the everyday person that makes $65,000 a year, what are you actually giving back to? Right? And giving back to your family is obviously one of those things, right?
As a component, absolutely.
You know, you don't want to be giving away all your revenue to where your spouse can't go to the grocery store and buy the things that you need, right? Because you're being overly frugal, but then giving to other outside communities. But I would say, as a business owner, what are you giving back to? What are you trying to change other than just your industry? Right? I think it's important to know that, because if you really want to be noticed in your community, that's one way to get noticed.
Oh, definitely is.
Right? So
definitely is. Now, so Daniel, you got two bits of information. One you gave to an earlier version of yourself, and one you gave to yourself just now.
Right.
I don't want the audience to feel left out. So if you wouldn't mind. What's one thing that you'd want to make sure the audience knows? So if you're going to share one thing that you think could have impact on them and their tomorrow, what would that one thing be?
Yeah, from an entrepreneurial standpoint, correct? We're talking to entrepreneurs right now?
Pretty much.
I would say the biggest thing, I mentioned it earlier, is do the upfront work. Do the things in the beginning that allow you to build your brand from the start, not just figuring it out. Like a lot of people just are going by the whim and just like, oh, I'm going to build this for anybody and everybody, right? We mentioned the GI doctor, right? Anybody who's got gut and butt issues, I'm here for you, right? Decide who it is that you're for. Decide who extensively through and through who that person is, and then craft your business to outfit that person and give them or give the industry that you're trying to change a reason to come and see you, because you are their person. Because it is very, very costly, both time and energy-wise and revenue-wise, to fix that later. So I would definitely find somebody from the very, very beginning that can help you hone in on exactly who you're for and what your message is to those people.
Wow. Right? Super powerful. So I appreciate you so much for coming in and sharing authentically. If the audience wants to reach out to you, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
Yeah, I need to rebrand this because there's too many quote unquote coaches out there. So my personal brand is actually Coach Tribby.
Coach Tribby.
I typically don't do a lot of one-on-one anymore. Coaching, I do full consulting for practices, because if I'm trying to tell you as a healthcare provider what to do, you're not going to follow through. So I just flush it with your whole team. But you can find me on Coach Tribby. My last name is Tribby. You can find that .com, and that's every handle across my social media platforms is just I am Daniel Tribby. So you can find me there.
Wonderful.
So
easy to connect. That gets in the show notes as well.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
This has been an amazing experience. I truly, truly appreciate you coming in and sharing so authentically with us. I know that your time is valuable, and I appreciate you being willing to invest it in this episode and to share it with the individuals who have basically decided to invest their time watching and learning from your story. So thank you.
Absolutely, and it was a pleasure. It was great to be here. This is a beautiful studio. I'm going to come steal your studio and record it.
Well, it's always here, so you know where we are now.
I love it.
And for you, I know 100% that you've gotten significant value out of this. So what are you waiting for? Hit that subscribe button because you're not going to want to miss what comes next. My name is Edward Collins. This has been another amazing episode of Entrepreneur Unleashed. Bye for now. Daniel, that was awesome. Thank you so much. If I can get up, there you go.